Hello everyone, my name is Reverend Lorina Pyle and I'm the pastor here at First Spiritualist Church. And today we have something very, very special planned. I have Douglas Barker here with me today, and he is what was your title again?
An art historian.
He is an art historian. I just know him as a very well-traveled book of knowledge about the world and Europe, and specializing in tarot cards, and just a really wonderful person. I love this person, Douglas Barker. He's just a wealthful of knowledge and so well-traveled and well-versed and speaks many languages, and just an all-around really great person. And I'm very thankful that he's here with me today, because today, August 26th, is the birthday of First Spiritualist Church. Now I'm going to show you, let me put my mask down. Let me show you this. Yeah, if we can get it close enough to see without the glare. And this is our incorporation. We were incorporated on August 26th, the day of 1885, which makes us a beautiful 135 years old today, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so I'm going to lend the camera over to Douglas, and while he's speaking, we have a little slideshow here. So while he's speaking, I'm going to put the camera on the computer so that you'll be able to see the slides and hear the story and all of the wisdom that he has to bring to all of us today. And apologies that this is a little old school, but you know what? We're going to make lemonade with this beautiful bowl of lemons that we have here in honor of this absolutely beautiful church who feeds, trains, blesses, saves, supports, and motivates so many. And I don't know if you know this, but did you know that this building, the First Spiritualist Church, was actually a parachute packing plant before it became the First Spiritualist Church? So it's been saving lives for a while now.
Sounds appropriate. Things coming down out of the sky.
That's right, things coming down out of the sky. Well, we all know that in order to save yourself, that's all an independent thing that we have to do for ourselves, and no building or anything can save what's on the inside except for you, and the motivation and the love and the education and the angels in the spirit world that are all here have been making that happen for 135 years. So without further ado, my wonderful world and audience, and thank you for joining us. This is Douglas Barker.
Okay, well, thank you. Reverend Lorina has asked me to speak today because of the anniversary of the church, and I was asked to speak about what exactly are the origins of spiritualism. Not just the story of the Fox sisters, but what set the stage so that spiritualism came about, because no religion simply pops up out of nowhere with no antecedents. And of course, when we talk about spiritualism as a movement, we're talking about what makes it unique. In other words, the practices of mediumship and hands-on healing. And these are two things that go all the way back into the mists of prehistory. Back in the Paleolithic, the Old Stone Age, these types of practices were going on already in some form or other. And obviously, it's a little bit much to try and talk about the entire history of spiritual endeavor and bring it up to spiritualism. So what I'm going to do is mention the relevant points along the way that brought about the movement. And when we look at something like mediumship, we are already talking about something that existed in ancient times. It shows up in the Bible. Could you put on the first slide for them to see? This
Sure.
is just a bit of background. You won't really need to look at me. Okay, if you look at that first slide that I set up there, that's actually a piece of sheet music from 1853, a song called Spirit Rappings, because already by that time, just a few years after the Fox sisters, Spiritualism had already become a craze. Now, I want to go back into history. We're going back 3,000 years to about the year 1010 BC. Can I see the next slide? And here we have the story from the book of Samuel of the witch of Endor. Now, this is a famous story from the Old Testament, and she's referred to as a witch, but in fact, when you read the story, it's obvious that she was a medium. The Bible was translated under the auspices of King James, the King James Version of the Bible, and King James had a bee in his bonnet about witches, and even wrote a book on the subject, and he considered that everything that happened in the kingdom that was evil was due to witches. They were a convenient scapegoat. So the woman was referred to as the Witch of Endor in the translation. But Endor was just a tiny little village in Palestine, and King Saul, the first king of the Israelites, had banished all of the mediums and magicians from the kingdom. They're referred to in the Old Testament as people with a familiar spirit. And of course, spiritualists will know exactly what that means. Well, there were Philistines who were gathering for a battle with the Israelites, and Saul was very afraid of what the consequence might be because it was a very powerful Philistine army. And he was searching about, trying to find information. He had been to the prophets. He had tried analyzing dreams. Nothing was coming to tell him exactly what would happen as the result of the battle. And so he asked one of his assistants, where can I find a woman with a familiar spirit? And they directed him to this woman at Endor, and he went there in disguise. Well, the woman was told, can you bring up a spirit if I ask you? And she said, you're trying to set a trap for me and I'll end up being executed. And he said, no, I give you my word. And so she said, well, who do you wish me to call? And he said, the spirit of the prophet Samuel, who had just died several years earlier. And so the woman did bring up the spirit of Samuel, and Saul, terrified, placed his face to the ground. Could we see the next one? Here's an excellent illustration by William Blake, the English poet, visionary, painter, watercolorist, and printmaker. And he said to Saul, God has turned his back on you because you have done evil in his sight. Tomorrow you and your sons will be killed and the entire Israelite army will be destroyed by the Philistines, which in fact was what happened. And true to his word, he made sure that nothing happened to the medium, and we hear really nothing more of her. But now we have to jump forward to more recent times. Now here we have a picture of Emanuel Swedenborg. Swedenborg was a Swedish Lutheran scientist, philosopher, and mystical theologian. Very, very significant for his effect on later mysticism, religion, and metaphysics in the 18th and 19th, 20th centuries. Now, by profession, he was actually an assessor for the Swedish Board of Mines. In 1741, Swedenborg was 53 years old, and he began to have strange visions and dreams, which culminated with a spiritual revelation on Easter weekend. Now, he was told that he had been chosen by Jesus Christ to write the Heavenly Mysteries, which was a work that would reform Christianity. And he went to work on this book, and after 10 years' work, it was finished. It was written in 8 volumes, and the volumes were written in Latin. And in it, he freely claimed that he could travel between heaven and hell, converse with angels, demons, and other spirits. He said that the second coming had happened in 1757, which was the year before he published the book, and that during the last 30 years of his life, he published some 17 more works on his visionary theology, which I must admit are very, very difficult to read. He rejected the doctrine of the Trinity. He stated that the Trinity existed in only one person, Jesus Christ. Swedenborg was a lifelong bachelor, had something of an obsession with the subject, though, because he wrote voluminously on the subject of marriage, stating that the relationship between husband and wife resumes in the spiritual world in whatever state it was in at the time of their death. If love is lacking, they will separate after death and will be given a compatible new partner if they want. And a person who never married, but who loved the ideal of marriage, will also be given a partner, so there was hope for him. Now, incidents are reported of Swedenborg's psychic and mediumistic abilities. On the 19th of July in 1759, a great fire broke out in Stockholm that consumed 300 houses. At the time, Swedenborg was having dinner with friends in Gothenburg, some 250 miles away. Suddenly, at about 6 p.m., he became very agitated and he told the party about the fire and said that it was threatening his own home. And 2 hours later, he exclaimed with relief that it had stopped 3 doors from his house. A few days later, couriers arrived with the news. Swedenborg's statements were precisely confirmed right to the precise hour that he had expressed the information, and the fire had indeed stopped 3 doors from his house. In 1758, he had visited Queen Louisa Ulrika. She asked him to tell her something about her deceased brother, the Prince Augustus Wilhelm of Prussia. The following day, Swedenborg whispered something to her that made the Queen go pale, and she told him that it was something that only she and her brother could possibly have known about. Within a few years of Swedenborg's death, small groups of dissenters had formed to study his writings, and eventually this became a Christian denomination known as the Church of the New Jerusalem. Some of the famous adherents of this church include the painter William Blake, whose work you just saw, the American woman Helen Keller, and the Englishman Isaac Pitman, who was responsible for developing Pitman shorthand. The American poet Robert Frost was baptized in the church but left it as an adult. But the most famous of all Swedenborgians, in fact today even more famous than Swedenborg himself, was a man who was born in Massachusetts with the name John Chapman. Later in life, he wandered about through western Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Indiana, and as he went, he planted apple nurseries. When he finished, he would put a fence around it, put it under some local person's watchfulness, and would come back a few years later just to make sure that the saplings were all right. And if you turn to the next slide, he's known in American history as Johnny Appleseed. Now, if we jump back to Europe, here we have a picture of Franz Anton Mesmer. Mesmer was a German physician. He was born in Meersburg in the south of Germany, this lovely little town. The house is still there. I've seen the plaque on it. And he was a German physician who had an interest in the influence of the planets on the human body. Mesmer theorized a natural energy transference between animate objects and between animate objects and inanimate objects. And he referred to this force as animal magnetism. Now, of course, what we're dealing with here are the currents of etheric energy, the formative forces of life. By 1774, he was working with clients, first in Vienna, then in Paris, and finally in Switzerland. Now, Mesmer understood health as the free flow of life force through thousands of channels in the body. He would have found Chinese medicine very interesting with its doctrine of various meridians. And he said that illness was caused by blockages in the flow. So when he dealt with a client, he would sit with his knees touching the patient's knees. He would take the person's hands and press the patient's thumbs in his hands and stare fixedly into their eyes. Then he would start to make passes down their arms from their shoulders, and he would press his fingers into the area just below their diaphragm. And in this way, he would move energy, and people began reporting cures. Now, in 1784, he was invited to come before a scientific committee in Paris in order to discuss animal magnetism. And he was unfortunately unable to establish the existence of animal magnetism to their satisfaction. Interestingly, one of the people on the committee was Benjamin Franklin, who was America's ambassador to France, and he should have known better than to condemn Mesmer's findings. Subsequently, Mesmer was more or less driven into exile in Switzerland, but he continued to have many followers, and some of these would emigrate to the United States and would spread his work there, which became known as Mesmerism. One of his followers was a minor French noble, the Marquis de Puységur, and the Marquis worked with a young man who went into a trance that was hitherto unknown. He appeared to be asleep. And so the Marquis is today credited with being the person who actually began hypnotism. In 1785, the Marquis taught a course in animal magnetism to a Parisian Masonic society. And he concluded with the words, "I believe in the existence within myself of a power. From this belief derives my will to exert it. The entire doctrine of animal magnetism is contained in the two words, believe and want. I believe that I have the power to set into action the vital principle of my fellow men. I want to make use of this. This is all my science and all my means. Believe and want, sirs, and you will do as much as I." Now, various Frenchmen came to the United States and went on lecture tours in which they would demonstrate animal magnetism. One person who heard their tours, heard one teacher, was Phineas Quimby, who went on to become the pioneer of the founder of New Thought, the idea of the law of attraction. Another was a young man named Andrew Jackson Davis. In 1843, Davis, who was an apprentice shoemaker at the time, heard lectures on animal magnetism in Poughkeepsie, New York. In the following year, Davis had an overwhelming visionary experience in which he was told of his life's mission by spirits, including the spirit of Swedenborg, who told him, "By thee will a new light appear." Now, Davis began delivering lectures on metaphysical topics while in a trance state, and in 1847 published the first of his book, The Principles of Nature, Her Divine Revelations, which he had dictated while in trance. Like the works of Swedenborg, the work is very difficult to read, and during his life he published altogether about 30 books. Davis was a rather interesting character. He married his first wife when he was 22 years old. She was 42 and sickly and died 5 years later. He then married again, and after 30 years of marriage announced to his wife, much to her surprise, that they were not true affinities. His true affinity was someone else. So he divorced his second wife and married his affinity, and eventually he and his third wife moved to Boston, where they opened up the Progressive Bookstore. Now, aside from the works of Swedenborg, he was also very much influenced by the Shakers. Now, without going into the whole history of the Shakers practiced a communal and celibate lifestyle, very charismatic worship, as you can see from the picture, and practiced the equality of the sexes, and were known for their simple lives, their industry, their hymns, dances, architecture, furniture, etc., and even their technical innovations. Now, beginning in 1837 and continuing until the mid-1850s, the Shakers knew this as the era of manifestations. It was a time of spiritual revival, and it was marked by spirit communication, ecstatic experiences, and gift drawings, which depicted visions. Next one. Here you see a couple of examples of them. One by an unknown artist, one by the woman who became probably the best known of their gift drawing artists, Hannah Cahoon. And the Shakers would dance, they would whirl and speak in tongues. And interestingly, in the 1840s, they foretold that spirit beings would soon, quote, visit every city and hamlet, every palace and cottage in the land. Incidentally, that drawing that you see there, Tree of Life by Cahoon, sold in 1997 for almost $300,000.
Oh my gosh.
Now, this whole area in upstate New York is called the Burned Over District, because during especially the early and mid-19th century, it had been swept by fiery religious revivals, one after the other, including not only the Fox Sisters and Andrew Davis and the Shakers, but also the Longhouse religion of Handsome Lake, the Mormons, the Seventh-day Adventists, and the Oneida Society. And here we see a picture of the Fox Sisters. Now, from right to left, they are Margaretta, known as Maggie, Catherine, known as Kate, and Leah. Leah was some 19 years older than the next sister. She was already married by this point and really took no part in the proceedings. But this episode in American history is known as the Hydesville Rappings. And the sister's story is fairly well known to a lot of people. The house where the Fox family was living in New York was already reputed to be haunted. Well, the family moved in anyway, and soon enough they began hearing knocks and rappings and spirit voices and things like this. And already they were worried about this and wondering what was going on. Well, the two younger daughters, Maggie was 14, Kate was 10, they began trying to communicate with the spirits. And the communication took place on the 31st of March in 1848. They began first snapping their fingers, and this drew the attention of the spirits, and then they worked out a code where the so many raps would correspond to the letters in the alphabet. And they began to get communications from the spirit, whom they mischievously referred to as Old Splitfoot, a popular name for the devil. And in the information which he gave out, told them that a peddler had been murdered in the house some 5 years earlier and had been buried in the cellar, and that this was responsible for the hauntings and the various activities that were going on. Well, as I've tried to indicate, spirit communication was not something that was absolutely new. Davis was already doing this in upstate New York and in other areas. But now spiritualism began to really take off, because since it was being done by two young girls, people began to see that it could be done by just about anyone. At the time, the major philosophy that was prevailing at the time was scientific materialism. Scientists and the intelligentsia believed that all we have to do is make a couple of more scientific discoveries and we'll understand the whole mystery of life. Well, that never quite happened, even with the research into the human genome in recent years. However, people wanted, as a result, the evidence of life after death to be physical. They wanted sense-perceptible evidence that there was survival after death. And as soon as this became known, it became spread primarily by a couple, Amy and Isaac Post, who were close friends of the Fox family. The Posts, it seems, however, were in fact radical Quakers. In other words, they believed in what today would be called the social gospel. They began to spread the knowledge of what the Fox sisters had done among their friends, who were also radical Quakers, and the result was that from the very beginning, the movement was characterized in general by people who wanted to see the abolition of slavery, the abolition of alcoholic beverages, and equal rights for women, including the vote. And in fact, spiritualism was one of the first movements to come along that actually gave women opportunities for spiritual leadership. The rest of the story is, of course, the history of spiritualism, which would have to be the subject for another talk. And so thank you.
Well, I want to thank you, Douglas, for sharing all that wonderful historical spiritual wisdom on where spiritualism kind of derived from and came from. And I would like to take you up on a part 2 of spiritual history. We can actually talk about Mr. and Mrs. Bushyhead and how this all evolved. But I think it's really nice to get a little bit of history on how everything kind of unfolded and came to America. And I think it's very fascinating and a really good way to honor the birthday of the church. And I'd like to thank all of you for joining us, and I want to thank you for bringing the slideshow, and thank you on behalf of First Spiritualist Church. Happy birthday, First Spiritualist Church. We love you, and we love all of you, and thank you for being part of this wonderful community. Thank you. Thank you, Douglas.
You're welcome.
And shall we send everybody a heart explosion? Do you go like this?
All right.
Yeah? Heart? Ready?
Yes.
Go. Reverend Lorina Pyle, and I'm the pastor here at First Spiritualist Church. August 26th, 1881. But we were incorporated in 1885, which actually makes us an incorporation birthday of 135 years old today. 135 years old for Spiritualist. So, if you would all join me in singing happy birthday to this beautiful church. Oh, by the way, this is my lovely assistant pastor, Reverend Edie Ortiz. This is our beautiful minister of healing, Reverend Ann Powell. And, of course, this is Landry. She's our church mascot, the best three-legged dog you'll ever run across. And the person recording for us, of course, is Lord. Thank you, Lord. So, everybody join me in singing a nice happy birthday. Let me put my mask on. Okay. Remember, we're 135 years old today. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, First Spiritualist Church. Happy birthday to you. And many, many more. So, it's so hard to talk with the mask on. I'm just going to stand over here. Now this year, for a nice birthday present, if anybody would like to send in donations through Venmo or PayPal, it'd certainly be appreciated. As you can see, I'm standing at the front of our church right now. We're missing a 7 on our address. It's 3777. Also, if you look here between these beautiful ladies, we're missing one of our pieces of glass. Now, this is the one thing with having a building this old, is finding a piece of glass in this same exact material. Well, they don't make them anymore, at least not here in San Diego. So any birthday gifts, donations, or anything that comes towards the church, we would like to be able to put it towards having all of this little part here with the doors resurfaced and the glass redone and the address put back up nice. I think that this would be a really beautiful and meaningful birthday present to the church, so that when we open back up from COVID, that the entrance can bring all the beautiful people back in and welcome them in. And as you know, we're here in University Heights, where it kind of gets a bad rap. I call this, and have for the last 19 years, a diamond in the rough. Wonderful, beautiful church who's helped so many. I've seen reverends come through here that are educated. I've seen people's lives change on a dime. I've seen people fall in love. I've seen people find their self. This church has helped so many, including myself. I know when I first came in here 19 years ago and my hair stood up and I started crying, I sat in the back where nobody would see me because I didn't understand what was going on. This is one of those places that you don't have to be involved with everyone, but sit in the energy, and it's transforming. It changes, it loves, it's healing. You can feel the essence of God and the angels all through this place. This is a very beautiful, special church, and I'm so incredibly proud to be part of this. So we had some graffiti done here today, and I want you to see this if you'll follow me. Look at this. Oh. To you. Right here. To you, peace, love, and look between the toes, happiness. So, you know, obviously, we're in a place where certain people may think that this isn't like the safest place to be or the most beautiful place to be. But as a diamond in the rough, it seems to be exactly where it needs to be. I don't feel afraid here. I feel a lot of sense of community, kinship. We have every different color, every gender that you can believe right here in this area. And we all get along together in peace and love, just as it should be. So for bringing everyone together, all of the healings, all of the love, and everything that this beautiful building has given in the name of spiritualism and in the name of all that's good. Happy birthday, First Spiritualist. And thank all of you for your love and your support, your prayers, your light, all of it. Do you have anything to add, or do you just want to do a heart? Do you want to say anything?
Yes, I'm gonna say thank you everyone to come to our church. Thank you for many people, for many prayers. Thank you so much.
And we're so grateful for our church. We've all had life-changing events in our lives at this church, and it wouldn't happen anywhere else. So we're so very grateful. We love this church. It's our second home. So thank you for everything, and happy birthday to the church.
In the light of gratitude and all that's good, peace, love, and harmony, we love all of you. We welcome you and invite you to this beautiful church as soon as it opens. Look up our website if you haven't already. And I just want to say thank you to these beautiful ladies that make up our Trinity. Thank you to this beautiful church that has changed my life. And I just want to say thank you for all of the incredible blessings that we all have the opportunity to experience all the time. Amen. Amen. Heart explosion? Ready? Go!